Thank you so much for staying tuned to this channel. Welcome to yet another edition of International Forum. I am Wilson Omasho. Well, today it is all about the drone attack in Moscow. And of course, Ukraine leader took credit for that. He said war is gradually going to Russia. What do you feel about that statement? And of course, there was a backlash after that comment. In because of that discussion, you get to see the reaction of Russia, because it's all about the Russian-Ukraine war. Before that, let's speak on some stories making the rounds globally. Let's move straight out to Canada, where wildfires is like ravaging Canadian land space. Over 30 million hectares or acres of land, so to speak, have been consumed by fire. Land mass as large as South Korea. The land mass of South Korea, if you compare that, the acres of land, you get to realize that Canada is like in for it, because right now, another firefighter, yes, died tackling that inferno, to show you how dangerous and how deadly it is. Some persons have already given up hope of curtailing some fire in some part of the forest of Canada, while others are fighting the ones that they can't fight. It's like, okay, fine, fire takes some part, we take some part, we just can't combat all of it, but at least we can do something to save lives and property, because right now it is just going out of control. I mean, it's like everywhere in that particular forest region, and they're doing their best to evacuate citizens, to evacuate schools, to evacuate wildlife, just to make sure that it doesn't spread beyond what they really expect. And our heartfelt condolence to the Canadian citizens, but I believe the government of the day is doing everything possible to make sure that Canada is in one piece after this great devastating inferno. Leaving Canada, let's move straight down to Pakistan, where there was a suicide bomb attack in Pakistan, where they were having a political rally, and at least 44 persons were killed after an explosion at the Islamist political rally. The big question now is, how are they going to conduct an election if this seems to be the order of the day? People coming together to, sell their manifestos to citizens, where party members, children, youths, mummies and daddies came together for a rally, and there was a severe explosion that snuffed off the life of more than 40 persons. That is so sad, because the government right now in Pakistan has been fighting terrorism for quite a while now, for some years now, but it's like somewhere along the line, they were beaten back, and the government of the day just loses focus, sort of. They tend to come back deadlier. People like saying that might just be what really happened in Pakistan, because the political parties didn't see it coming. This is an Islamic political party, for crying out loud. So what really went wrong? Who did they offend? Is it about politics? Is it about religion? Is it about governance of the day? Or is just because of sheer wickedness that some group of persons just want to explode an improvised explosive device that took off the life of over 40 persons? What will be the thought behind that person's mind? Pure act of wickedness, pure act of terrorism. We just pray that they're able to recuperate sooner than they are kept in that situation. Leaving Pakistan, let's move straight down to what is going on in Niger. Yes, it's no longer news that there was a coup d'etat in Niger, and they were given 7 days by ECOWAS to revert back to status quo when you talk about democracy. And the countries involved in the coup, they too, they warned ECOWAS, saying, look, do not interfere. An attack on Niger by any external military force is an attack on Mali. It's an attack also on Burkina Faso, and they are going to retaliate. Now, the strange thing about this junta is that many of the citizens in this country, they are happy about it. Yes, they are happy. You get to see the jubilation. You get to see them attacking politicians. You get to see them destroying property, saying, look, enough is enough. You have to tell us how you used our money, our common patrimony. How did you spend it? And so we're given 48 hours to give an answer, or else you'll be taken out of planet Earth. I mean, that is how it has become. Why? ECOWAS is saying, look, enough is enough. UN is saying, enough is enough. AU, you just, let me just stop what powers are saying, enough is enough. Russia is saying, let the people have the kind of government they deserve. That was what they said. As many persons interpreted Russia's reaction as supporting the coup d'etat. Russia never came out openly to say they are supporting the coup d'etat. I said, no, let the people get the government they deserve. If this is what they deserve, you let them be. Are you seeing power tussle right now in these West African states riddled by coup d'etat? Mali, Burkina Faso, now Niger. I was seeing top world powers saying, yes, you have to run to status quo. One is saying, no. If that's what they want, you let them be. What do you feel about that? Definitely West Africa, we are in for a ride. Serious ride. Our prayer is that it doesn't spread to other countries because I don't know how that would definitely pan out. Well, it's time for me right now to introduce my guests. They are waiting to really talk about what is going on right now in the Ukraine-Russia war, the drone attack in Moscow, and of course the subsequent impact and the subsequent effect. With me here in the studio, I have political analyst, political affairs commentator, a youth mobilizer. He is an activist. Join me to welcome Honorable Etiosa Igebo, aka Sunny, on a rainy day. Welcome, appreciate your coming.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thanks.
All right, and of course, my heartfelt condolence to you on the demands of your dad. Yeah, really felt that. All right, but all the same, as I say, he has given birth to you, a strong man in everything. So focus. We'll be there with you.
You can manage.
Yeah, we'll be there with you.
Yeah,
it happened to me too. It wasn't really funny. Wasn't really funny, but all the same, God will see you through as He saw me through. You understand? All right. So very close to me is a legal practitioner, political analyst, political affairs commentator. Join me to welcome Barrister Gabriel Ehigato. Barrister, welcome to International Forum.
Thank you, Mrs.
Appreciate your coming.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon.
All right. Barrister, you are an advocate of saying, let Ukraine breathe. You've always shown that to your analysis, let Ukraine breathe. And right now, they did what some people term the unthinkable.
Yes.
They claimed responsibility for the drones that attacked Russia, Moscow, that so many buildings destroyed, or say 3 buildings destroyed, no life lost. All right? And now they're saying that war is coming to Russia gradually. That was the statement of the president of Ukraine. How do you view this action of Ukraine?
Well, those that make peaceful resolution impossible will end up making violent revolution inevitable. Yes, just like you said, I'll be over time be an advocate that they should allow the Ukrainian breathe. I think Russia took this war so far. I would think that what is happening to Russia, and Russia never believed that Ukraine might go come in this way. But one thing that surprised me, and I keep saying it, is that the impact and the response of United Nations, the response of NATO and other social international organizations, what effort have they done to actually put a stop to this war? To actually, put the people together, call it the Russian government and the Ukrainian government to a round table to say how to have resolved this whole issue, have been issue from the beginning. But there have never been any response as such. Anytime there seems to be an issue of, resolving the ball, resolving issues, that is when there will be another attack. If you look at it critically, politically, and clearly, you will find that this is the first time that Ukraine is actually attacking Russia so much. It has been Russia on Ukraine. A few months ago, Russia took over the western region of Ukraine. Ukraine were only able to settle and survive the southern region and the eastern region. The western region was thoroughly destroyed. So I wonder now why it's becoming more of a news that Ukraine over time will be oppressed by Russia. Just only one strike. Just only one strike in the capital city of Russia is raising so much dust and issue. And people are saying what the Ukrainian government and army did is so wrong. But the Ukraine have been suffering over time. There be no response. The response they have from NATO. They were only supply ammunitions, but they were not trained on how to use those ammunition. So to me, my heart goes to Ukraine, even at this war. So I feel that at this time, the United Nations and other international organizations to actually come together to see how to put a stop to the brazen war. Because, just as I told you months ago, the more we look at this war, the more it's going to creep to other regions. And do not forget that the social life of the people that is being at stake. They are being increased in all sorts of supply. Whether PMS or food and what have you, because of the war. And it's even affecting other regions of the European Union. Do not forget that Russia have the highest and one of the best oil in the whole of Europe. And it's affecting nations, it's affecting the economy of nations. So I think at this time now, it shows that the Ukrainians are no cowards. They can actually also bet and shoot bones when the occasion demands. So I feel that at this juncture, everybody should step down and see how to sincerely, resolve the issues.
Right.
Because the issue have lingered for so long.
For so long. Over 500 days and counting since inception of this war. Attacking Moscow with drones. Was that a smart move by the Ukrainians? Because the president came out to say, yes, we did it. This to tell Russia that war is gradually coming to them. Take it up from there.
I don't know if it is after Zelensky is captured himself before he understands that Ukraine is a no match for Russia. Just like my colleague said, I think it's about time that they sit down on a round table. I have never been an advocate of war in any way or form, but at the same time, I do believe that it's more like the big brother and the little brother sort of dispute. Because at the end of the day, when one particular incident happens in Russia, like a drone strike, so many drones are fired on a regular basis. When one of them eludes the radar system and it lands in Russia or Moscow, it's a big story. But what about the multiple people and the multiple buildings and the multiple targets of the bombs raining down, supersonic bombs in Ukraine, and how many people that have died? So sometimes it's hard to balance the books. It's hard to understand where this whole idea is going to, because it's more like Ukraine gets a lot of pounding, 1,000 times more, and by the time it gets down a particular area in Moscow or in the Kremlin or anywhere close to where any sensitive information might be, whether it's a storage facility or a military depot, you make a big deal out of it. I think war is never a beautiful thing. For the people that are caught up in the mix within that space, I'm sure that if you ask the Ukrainians with thought of hindsight today, they probably would not support the idea of going to war with Russia. It's a sad thing, I would assume that at this point, because from the beginning, there was this feeling that after 6 months, Russia will run out of ammunition and they may not be able to carry on with the war because the whole West European countries and America is supporting Ukraine. As much as I understand that it's about interest, America has their reasons and the NATO organizations and the Europeans, why they're doing what they're doing. And Russians also have their reasons for defending themselves. Like you rightly said, you can see the cost of living has gone up. If you speak to people you know in Europe today, they are all suffering. People who used to live a comfortable life are now living like poor people in a third world country. I don't understand and I don't know how long this is going to go for. And on that backdrop, that problem is spiraling out of control now. Russia is not taking certain stands and making world security a difficult place. Like for example, with what is happening in Africa and Niger. Whilst they are speaking well, let the country provide the president that they like. That's a democratic elected government, which ordinarily Russia may not get up to support such a coup d'etat. But in order just to give back whatever the effect they were getting using Ukraine as a proxy enemy to them, who are their younger brothers, they will want to start supplying arms to that very country now. And that will make things difficult. Look at Bashar al-Assad's country in Syria. For as much as the Europeans tried to get rid of him, they couldn't because he had Russian support. Once Muammar Gaddafi was in power and the NATO was looking to go after him because of the issue of weapons of mass destruction, and it was not safer to have him around, Russia had to pull back at some point to stop supplying them arms and tactical support in order for Gaddafi to go down. If Russia was supplying that, there would have been problems. So what I'm trying to say in a nutshell is that the balance of power cannot exist in this world with one-sided authoritarian or hegemony approach. It must be kind of like, okay, the Eastern Bloc, the Western Bloc, and at the end of the day, the US sits on the table. Other superpowers like Europeans, like the English and the French, and the Chinese and the Russians sits together and find a working plan in terms of world security, bilateral relationship. Once that is not happening, believe me, this whole idea of this war, people are profiting from it, and a lot of innocent people are dying, and the problem will continue to spiral. And I don't see how we can live in a world whereby it is always the barrel of the gun that will determine the dialogue on whatever you want to do on the way forward. So I think it's a sad moment. Okay. I think it's a sad period, and I can't really wait to see a dialogue put on the table where America and Europeans and China and Russia sit together and just end the war around the world.
Well, some are saying that Ukraine drones passing through Russia airspace to acquire that target in Moscow was a huge mistake on the part of Ukraine that will really anger Russia. And of course, the following day, we saw how Russia retaliated. It wasn't funny. They targeted Zelensky's hometown that has over 600,000 citizens there. Children were affected, women and men were affected, the elderly also they were affected. The drone attack on Moscow, was it a huge mistake on the part of Zelensky, Barrister?
Well, I listened to the commander of the army of the Ukrainian government some days ago. Of course, in the technicality statement, he didn't state if it was a mistake. They feel that it was also a right on their own part to have retaliated. When you look at it critically, over time, Russia attack on Ukraine, even before now, because whatever is giving this whole incident preference is the issue of the drone. Even before now, Russia have attacked Ukraine major oil deposit. They've attacked their major, national waste substance, but there was no complaint. There was no complaint. Not that it is the turn of the Ukrainian government, Ukrainian army to retaliate, it's only raising issues. So to me, I don't think it was a mistake, because Ukraine has become like a child who is homeless. It doesn't have the support of anybody. We are surprised that the body language of international organizations, because I will keep on naming international organizations, because these are the reasons, these are some of the benefits you get to be a member or why you are a member. We are surprised that NATO is not joining Ukraine to fight Russia, neither are they joining the board for negotiation. We are also surprised that the United Nations is also doing the same. So we have to leave Ukraine to fight this war, because the war has passed through a stage of negotiation the way it is. But I don't want to believe that. I feel that they say a lot that can be done. But we actually need sincerity of purpose. We actually need the genuineness of this international organization to see how to resolve the issue.
So are you not saying that...
Hold on.
Are you not saying that it's not a mistake on the part of Ukraine? They did the right thing.
No, not at all. Because there were incidents where Russia attacked Ukraine long before now. They destroyed a lot of their deposit. Because at the beginning of the war, it looked as if they were not going to attack things that had to do with the personal life of the citizens. Things such as electricity, electricity boldness and the rest. But when you look at it, all of this, let's take analysis of all the attacks that Russia always have on Ukraine. It has never been easy. This is the first major attack that Ukraine is having on Russia. Although it is actually very damaging, but this is actually the first major attack. Over time, it has been Russia attacking Ukraine and attacking their major substance and resources. So how do you expect them to survive? The truth is this: the United Nations, the international organizations, and the rest needs to come together. Putin needs to be called to order before, even at the time, the Russians were not even in support of Putin again. They were not support. They were already some level of protest on one or two corners against Putin. So we are not very interested in this war. Let's come to a round table. Let's resolve our differences with the Ukraine. But Putin has never listened to his people. He seems to be a man alone in the wilderness. And he is not taking. This war will consume further than what we are seeing it now.
All right. You heard him. He said pieces like, a one-man army. He talked about some persons saying enough of this. So don't forget about the rebel by the Wagner group, though it was like, sorted out and all that. Wagner country report right now, they've stopped recruiting and they are now focusing on Africa. That is my fear of what might happen in Niger, but that's a talk for another day. Ukraine attacking Russia with their drones. You understand? Like some question I asked, it was like saying that, look, this is like a huge mistake because the following day, Russians responded massively. The response of Russia, come on, was it really called for? No, you fully would have been pounding Ukraine just like we've rightly submitted.
Well, I think, like I always use that word, opinion divides people. I think it was a big mistake on the part of Ukraine to be able then to take out a particular position or a particular drone that has eluded or invasive approach to Moscow that has hit a particular target in Moscow. It was a huge mistake. Because if it wasn't a mistake, they would not rain bombs on Ukraine the very next day and targeting Zelensky's town. I don't think that is what they meant, they wanted to prove by hitting a particular target with a drone. If you understand how a drone attack works, you can misread it. It's like a plane-like object that flies into a particular location. It was not like a supersonic bomb or a cruise missile or a guided bomb that is targeted at a particular point, fired from the country Ukraine and they hit a target in Russia, which obviously can be more devastating. I don't think drones carry warheads. Do you know what I'm saying? So if you ask me, I would tell you that it was a mistake. And for them to have hit a place in Russia, Russians understand very well that it is probably because of the support that they're getting from other mercenaries from other countries trained. That is why it has happened. And whenever they respond, with the amount of targets that they hit, let's just imagine for once that was carrying a nuclear warhead. And it hits a city where there's 600,000 people. They are gone. Everybody gone. So when he complains and he talks about the fact that United Nations, NATO, and all these European countries have not been bold enough to do X, Y, Z, I think the most they can do is what they're doing now. Because for a very long time, I've continuously said it. As much as the people are making money from the war, they don't want the war to get to their doorstep. And the only war getting to their doorstep is the involvement and pushing the button of a nuclear bomb, which will affect the whole world, including them. So it will never get to that point. As much as some of the aims and objectives has been achieved with stopping Russia cheap energy flow into Europe, or maybe Russia making money and challenging the US authority in places like Syria and Yemen and some of these places where the Western world or the treaty had interest, that may have angered that idea of why the war has started. I think ego is playing up now to say, well, who bucks first, who budges first. But let us not forget the Minsk agreement. The Minsk agreement was a big issue, whereby the Ukrainians felt that the Russians would live with, the Russians felt that the Ukrainians who live within the space of the Crimean region was being killed for about 8 years, and nobody said nothing about it. And it was very obvious that something was very wrong along those lines. And by the time the Russians said they were going to protect their people and there was an uprising, the pro-Russian government being taken down in 2014, this problem became moving from bad to worse. And as it is today, many states and many towns in Ukraine have been practically leveled, destroyed. Everybody there sacked. So, I mean, it's like 1,000,000 to 1 slap. You give Russia one slap.
1,000,000 to 1 slap?
Yeah, Russia comes back with 1,000,000 slaps. And the more they are fighting, the more Ukraine gets smaller. And for me, I am not saying that Russia has complete right to say Ukraine cannot join NATO. I am not saying that they have that right. Because everybody should have a right to exhibit their franchise, whoever they want to deal with. But they say what is good for the goose is good for the gender. If we must speak and speak truth to power, we must be able to come online or on live TV or whatever to let people understand the true position of how you see it. Not necessarily because you are taking sides with anybody. This is what I'm saying. If you cannot have a missile defense system or a particular affiliation in Cuba, close to the US, why can you have it as a buffer zone with Russia? I mean, up to this day, has the Ukrainians been allowed to join NATO? Of course not. So what is the purpose of the war? People are making money from the war. Innocent Ukrainians are dying. A beautiful country is being destroyed. And then you want to talk about the propaganda of the media houses, whereby most of the things we listen to in Africa is always tilted to a particular direction. if this drone strike in Moscow is one strike, not 100 strikes, and you want to replicate that to what is happening in retaliation with Ukraine, you can agree with me that that was a mistake on their part. Because if another drone strike lands in Ukraine, you have another 100, 200 responses and more buildings and more facilities being destroyed, ammunition depots being destroyed in Ukraine. So to me, I am concerned and worried that by this time, I believe that issues and dialogue should have been on the table. President Zelensky, for me, you want to think that there's no rebellion or people reacting to the fact that there shouldn't be war in Ukraine? Of course there are. But the medias will never show you that. As much as in Russia, where people come up and then say to President Putin that we don't want this war, because they have intermarital relationship in those countries, doesn't necessarily mean that there may not be any uprising in a place like Ukraine.
All right.
But in my own little wish that I would have loved to see happen this time, is a situation whereby they sit on a round table. Because remember, North Korea is there, China is there, working with Russia. The ammunition that Russians are producing, they're still producing them. Those ammunitions, even new technologies has been tested. New submarines has been commissioned, just to create fear with the supply of grain that is affecting us in Africa. Now the Wagner Group issue. They've left the shores of Ukraine now. They've retreated back. Who knows if it was a game plan to the neighboring country. And all of a sudden, you're seeing the Wagner Group being connected with the problem in Niger. So all these problems and all these wars hasn't been of help to humanity. It has not been of help. I think they should sit down. America is the leader. The Europeans and the British and the French, they are the leaders. Let them sit with the Russians and the Chinese. Let them resolve the issues. Let them take the world back to the way it was.
All right.
Whereby people can benefit mutually through democratic engagements rather than firing bombs and bullets.
All right, so if you just joined us, this is the International Forum. We're taking a look at the Russia-Ukraine war. We are also explaining the drone attack in Moscow. Some are saying it was an act of desperation on the side of the Ukrainians, in the sense that Russia chose to stop the grain deal. That was the reason why they got so annoyed to say, look, Russia, enough is enough, tit for tat. Well, when we return after this break, my analysts really throw more light on basis. It's a kind of a desperation attempt, or it has gone to the extent that you hit my capital, definitely I'll come for yours also. Don't go away, we'll be right back. Attacking the capital of Russia, Moscow, not the Kremlin now, their headquarters, not just Moscow, the outskirts, buildings, high-rise building affected, no life was lost, just a little bit of attack, and that really sent a wave of excitement. And the Ukrainians saying, yes, this is possible, taking the war to Russia. President Zelensky came out to say war is gradually going to Russia. Some are saying this is an act of desperation occasioned by the stoppage of the grain deal by Russia. Don't forget that the Russians, when they bombarded the area of the Black Sea that really has this grain stored, and some persons lost their life in that particular attack by the Russians. And then after that incident, a few days later, the capital of Russia, Moscow, was touched. Yes, and of course, Russia retaliated. They really retaliated. This time around, targeting Zelensky's hometown. A strong warning. Well, Barrister, I mean, taking a look at the response of some point is saying that Ukrainians, they kind of, went too far, but that is an act of desperation. But somebody say, look, since you can get to our capital using drones, we too can get to your capital. I mean, how do you view this kind of opinion, contrary opinions for and of course against the drone attack?
Well, what Ukraine did is the last kick of a dying horse. And I might stand with them, I might support with them. I believe that when you are fighting the battle, it is good to fight and defend what you believe. In as much as people say that the attack was a huge mistake, but the Ukrainians did see it that way. I said it before, and I will say it again. I listened to the comment of the commander. Even if he says that their intention was not actually targeting a particular space. And now that has happened. They are not regretting their actions because they have been fighting the war all alone by themselves. Along the line, there will never be any response from any social community, from any organization, and what have you, except the supply, the support they had a few time ago, and they were not trained. What people need in war is human capacity. You can't give me a car and not teach me how to drive the car. So it's not just enough to supply their weapons. I understand what my brother here, Tuesday Gibo, is saying. But of course, once there's a war, people will definitely make more
cashing
money.
on it, yes.
Yeah, for the war, they don't want it to stop. But we must look at the issue critically. The cause of the war. I mean, Ukraine have the right to exercise their franchise, just the way I said. They have the right to join NATO or not to join NATO. So we can't say that. I mean, you can't say because I live so quietly to a judge, they actually own a party, simply because the judge do not like disturbance or noise. I have my right. So that's what Ukraine is trying to exercise. So again, I say, I do not see that as a mistake. I just feel that it is just one of those actions. I understand the fact that countries like the United Nations and the rest are trying to avoid war. He's spreading war. That has to do with nuclear weapons, intercontinental ballistic missiles, and what have you. But Ukraine is dying. Ukraine are suffering. So they need to fight for their life. And that's what they are doing. That's what the government is doing. Because Putin over there seems not to have any regard for any president. He has never honored any treaty. He has never honored any round table. Let's resolve this issue. He has never.
But he said the talk of peace is not out of the table yet. He said it's still open to negotiations. Come, let's talk. But the condition given to Ukraine, that is that, look, disband your army, leave the Donetsk region for Russia. Everything will be cool.
What efforts have Russia made? You're asking the man to put down his weapons while you are holding yours. What effort have Russia made? We should look at it, because Ukraine do not even trust the intent of the negotiation being offered. Ukraine do not trust Russia to that extent. So they are still scared. So they need to defend themselves and arm themselves. So I think that if there will be any room for negotiation, Russia will be the first to bring out their arms and let actually start the negotiation on a genuine note. If not, we should allow Ukraine to fight their war even if they are there, because the way it sits now, everybody is actually scared of Russia. That's why this is social oppression. It shows that Russia does not have respect for international treaty. It does not have respect for international organizations. And it is well spreaded by Putin himself, who seems to put himself in a position of a demigod. And he seems not to listen to anybody, who is most unfortunate.
He seems not to listen to anybody, according to Barrister Gabriel Ehigato. But some pundits are like saying, going down memory lane, when Russia also attacked Georgia, what Georgia did to end the war was to attack Moscow. Talking about their half, they went to their submarine train and there was a massive explosion. People died in that attack, and that was how Russia packed out of Georgia. They gave similar examples also of other countries that Russia tried to, bring back to, as trying to reform the USSR Ford. But this was what they did to gain their freedom, and Russia never stopped them. That if Ukraine can do that, this might just signal the end of the war, and this might tell the world that Russia's defense system is not impregnable.
That's completely not correct. When it comes to the issue of defense systems, I can tell you that Ukraine would have fired like 1,000 drones. And one of the drone hits doesn't mean that 999 have not been stopped. You see what I'm saying? I mean, for the Putin's case, my colleague here, I don't know how he sees his own views on Putin, but I think you should understand that Putin is the president of a country. And as the president of a country, who says he doesn't want a state that was part of USSR haven't broken down and allowed to govern itself with their influence still there, to be part of NATO? It's not far-fetched from the fact that the people on the other side, like the United States, don't want same. So that is where I anchor that argument. If, for example, the US has not gone against having Cuba have a missile defense systems, I can understand to say, well, Russia, you're completely wrong for saying that Ukraine cannot have the same. I remember when I went to Georgia, I can remember in 2008, I think President W. Bush was the president.
Yeah.
And Russia had to almost march into Georgia before they pulled back, because they talked about building a missile defense system facing east, the enemy. So the Chinese and the Russians said, who is the enemy? We are the ones in the east. And Russia went in there, and the W. Bush was forced to get the Georgian president to step down and put down his guard. You cannot expect Russia to put down his arm when they are the man with the big guns. You don't expect Russia to put down the arms. It's like you telling me, as a barrister, you're having a case fighting with a senior advocate of Nigeria who is well experienced in matters in terms of working out plans, that he should step down for you, who's probably just coming up and you're not on the level of senior advocate. That would be very, very difficult.
But so that is oppressive.
No, I mean, it can be. Depends
said it's oppression.
Yes. That's what Russia is doing.
Depends on where he sees this from. That's what I'm saying. Depends on the prism or trajectory that he's looking at it from. I see it as the issue of missed agreement, like I said. There was an agreement to say that certain Russian citizens was living within Ukraine because of the boundary adjustments. And those people were being killed by the Ukrainian military. They had a roundtable talk for 8 years. Those people were being killed. And it got to a point, those people kept crying back to Russia and said they should protect us, because they had to respect their authority in terms of the region. Russia was secretly arming those rebels to fight back. But the impact of the Ukrainian army was more on the Russian citizens, whereby over 14,000 people, women and children and kids have been killed over that period. So the issue of bringing in NATO into Ukraine gave Russia the audacity now to come into having an opportunity to really create that natural buffer zone. If you look at the areas they've destroyed in Ukraine, you can see that they're trying to make the country smaller and create more rooms in terms of not allowing them to come so close to their borders. For me, I wouldn't want to sit here and blame Vladimir Putin. I'm not a fan of Vladimir Putin, because when you go back to the history in Nigeria, the war that happened here in the Biafran war, they were supported by the Russians. You know, but Russians and the Americans support whoever they feel is on their side. And they've always had that instances of creating wars, and people fight and they benefit from it. These are superpowers, for crying out loud. They say when the elephants fight, the grass suffers. The way it looks now is like the people, like Ukraine is a pawn in the chess game. And Russia can actually do so much damage, which they've been doing. I remember Barrister Abakpalo was forced to find reasons with me.
Yeah.
What is happening in Ukraine is not fair. Because why? Ukraine will fire a drone that flies like a plane to hit a target. But at the same time, Russians will be in their point and use sophisticated weapons and fire missiles, supersonic missiles from a range from their territory and hit multiple targets in Ukraine. You see what I'm saying? The damage level is so much with the Russian attacks that those things should stop. When they want to bomb your train lines, they bomb them. When they want to bomb your power facility, they bomb them. If they want to bomb your presidential villa, they'll bomb it. If you know they have the capacity to do that, what I am saying is that whether Russia is right or wrong, whether the Ukrainians were right or wrong, whether the West was right for them to create that unnecessary conflict between them, whereby they cannot now come up and say we want to go and fight for Ukraine. Remember, during Iraq, Libya, Syria, most of these wars that has happened in Afghanistan, the United States, with all due respect, went to get the United Nations resolution. They went to war regardless and called it a holy war, I remember. So Russia is a superpower. If you can do that, and we are not just going into Ukraine because Ukraine never wanted NATO. They say, if you don't have NATO, we'll leave you alone. But if you want to bring in NATO and create a system close to our borders, we'll come after you. I think that is something food for thought for people to go back and really look more into that history as to why the complication in the Russian and Ukraine war. I don't think Russia will ever back down, and I know that Russia has more stronger capabilities to create problems. Like the grain issues now, we are suffering it in Africa. We can't gain grains anymore, because the minute they stop that grains travel, it will be more expensive for Ukraine to route their grains through a much...
But Russia said they'll give Africa free grains. That's what Russia promised.
You see, but that is a promise. A promise is not something that you can say for fact that has been done. Because remember, all the information that we have and we get is based on what we read online and what we see on the social media or TV channels. And most of these channels are controlled by the same people who are engineering this war.
All right. All right. Now, you keep talking about peace. You called on the UN, called on NATO to support Ukraine. To what end? To end the war? To repair Russia? to fight them back, to claim back their territory. To what end, really? Because right now it's like Russia is not budging.
Yes.
They are coming out stronger.
Yes,
For
exactly.
every drone that touches Moscow, because let's say 3 or 4 drones about touched Moscow, you could see the response of Russia, as in Zelensky almost wept when he saw what Russia did to his hometown. He almost, what he said, look, our spirit cannot be broken. We will fight on. He knew they were at the receiving end. But if these guys should come in, what do you think will be the end game?
So, over time, we have been taught that international organizations,
Yes.
one of their core value and you know, actually is to put things together, to help nations, members, to resolve issues. And I think that's what they need to be doing.
Broken peace.
Because what we are saying is that their body language, they are silent over here, over time. It's what actually led to the spread of this war. It started little by little. We know how a war can start, but we don't know how it will end.
That's the end.
So that's the situation we are. That's why I keep calling on the United Nations, the NATO, and the whole to come to a round table with the Ukrainian government and the Russian government to resolve the issues and resolve their differences. So I believe that with that, they will be able to achieve more needed peace than people that have been destroyed. Take it or leave it. Even if it seems the Russian government you know, are attacking more, or their attack seems to be doing more damage. People are also dying in Russia. The Ukraine is also attacking back. But it's not good for humanity. It's not good for sensibility's sake. So I feel that United Nations, NATO, and other international organizations need to actually come together to do a proper framework to start to resolve these two countries, to start to resolve the issues and bring them together. Because if this international organization has become this way, for a war between Russia and Ukraine, then what happens when it spread to other African nations?
But Russia is blaming it on this same person that the reason the war started in the first instance. We don't want you close to our borders, and this same person was saying, look.
If you do not need NATO at the negotiation table, what happened to the United Nations? You don't also need that? Because it is because people who are members of these organizations, countries that are members of this organization, that seems to have the more needed attention, seems to be like big boys, you know, or big Jesse. Because when you talk about United Nations, I know your mind is going to go back to America. And Russia doesn't want America. Russia do not like America. The US are going to be members of these organizations. You know, going to talk to Russia to bring down their harm, talk to Ukraine, let's go to a round table, let's see how to resolve the issues. Or are we going to just look at them till the whole country burn down? If tomorrow Russia succeeded in bringing down Ukraine, the war is going to spread to other countries. I do not believe it will end there. It's going to spread. As we are talking that China is warming up. Every day China is cleaning their international you know, ballistic missiles and their weapons. They don't have war with anybody, but they are just cleaning it every month. It can happen tomorrow. They can also, you know, bust out.
No, they call it weapon maintenance. They're trying to oil it. Okay. They're not going to fight anybody.
That is risky. That is risky. To our social living, that is risky. So I feel...
It says polish and use.
No, but I feel...
They don't want to be rusty at all.
No, but I feel that if as much as we are calling Russia to the table in terms of negotiation and peace talking, Russia shouldn't be forming the big boy, even if they are. That is because I see this as this attack on Ukraine. I see it as oppression, and I do not like when a higher power seems to be oppressing the Somali. I don't like it at all. Right. I just do not like it.
All right. You see, speaking now, because of what I said, he said, let Ukraine breathe. That's always been his stand. Leave Ukraine alone.
Let it poor breathe.
Because right now, it's like Saudi Arabia is attempting to do what UN, NATO couldn't do. They say they want to broker peace. They invite Putin, they invite Zelensky or the rep to come talk that they really want peace to, you know, reign in this conflict. Do you see them achieving this feat? No, people know that Turkey's president couldn't do it.
Yeah, I think it's very possible for them to achieve peace if Saudi Arabia wants to take on that. Saudi Arabia has taken a position with the US and the Western world and NATO treaty alliance already. They never succumb to whatever demands that they make. I think the Russian and Ukraine war reminds me of the subsidy problems in Nigeria, whereby a certain small a niche group of people cry that they're making so much money They don't have anything to do with money, and yet they cannot let go. You know, if you're pumping Ukraine to keep trying to fight with the big boy, like he says, and then the Ukraine will talking about fighting with their last blood, for instance, and the person that is speaking for Ukraine is one comedian.
No, he is the president now, please.
No.
He's the president. He is the president.
He's the president of Ukraine, but he was a comedian before that time.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes you are born with an idea. Look at footballer like Lionel Messi. It was spotted from a very young age. It was flown out to Spain at the age of 10. It was given injection to grow because they knew he was going to become a great footballer. Today, he's the best in the world today. Amongst other best.
Many would dispute that being the best.
No,
anyway, let's
like
leave sports.
Let's
leave sports without please. Let's focus on this one here.
Like Cristiano Ronaldo. What I'm trying to say, he has not exhibited or shown the attributes of a leader, of somebody who can lead a very nation like Ukraine, who's caught in between a pimp and a hot place. Because Ukraine becomes the country that was of interest to annoy Russia or to poke them, to respond to certain things. You see what I'm saying? From a special military operations, today you can tell me, you can agree with me that the Russia-Ukraine problem is no longer a special military operation. It's a full-blown war. What he is saying is that he's afraid for the problem not to speed up beyond that point. If you want to leave Russia for a bit and you talk about China's involvement, what about Taiwan and Taipei? What about the visit of the US Congresswoman to that country trying to annoy China? And you don't expect them to clean their arsenals? Of course they will. You see, what is good for the goose is good for the gender. What you know people cannot do to you, don't do it to others. It's unfortunate that these Western countries have always lived off other people's natural resources. I'm sorry to say. Because Russia they are blessed with gold and oil and whatever, and the rivalry, they choose to use that path to fight the war. I think, like he said, that war has not worked in favor of anybody. Russia has lost people. Ukraine has lost more people. I will tell you that for free, without even asking so much questions. Going forward, I think that it is about time where it will be an embarrassing thing for the fact that it is Saudi Arabia that will broker peace between Ukraine and Russia, when we have the big boys like the United States, who's a world leader, and England and France and Germany, these big superpowers, having to be pushed to one corner or says, well, your words don't matter anymore, and for Saudi Arabia to now broker the peace. What do you think that will create? It will create more instability, because the leadership of the United States with England and these countries has created development, a lot of development across the world through bilateral relationship. I don't want a situation whereby the US and the English and the French are not leading, because whether you like it or not, they give Africans enough to sustain and live on from the development and interrelationship we have with business. Just that sometimes, most time, Africa misuse their money. But however, if they are leading and everybody's tooting towards the Western world, I think that should be something that will sustain. They will be thinking with the thought of hindsight that they've made a mistake for going this far. But I think they should take advantage of wanting to broker the peace rather than allowing Saudi Arabia to do it. Because Saudi Arabia was once strongly a US ally. But at the same time, because this problem has started from the position that I'm standing from, it's probably why the Saudi Arabians has thrown their weight more towards Russia. They are giving Russia the opportunity to believe that their position is not far-fetched from the truth. And at the end, it's creating debates and people having different opinions being built. Right. So like the issues of Russia and Ukraine is a situation whereby those who are hegemony, power-hungry mongers in the Western world, in terms of the colonial masters and the oppressive people, who has oppressed so many nations, as to why the Nigerian coup is speaking about oppressions from the French government, has created a situation where people has risen up in this path and way to create problems between Russia and Ukraine. Right. It's more like, it's likened to the problems with the fuel subsidy, where people in this country are now fixing prices, creating problems for the current government, believing that they cannot solve it. Like they said, after God is government. And I'm very sure that Ukraine and Russia will sit down, resolve that problem, and the issue of fuel subsidy and the problem with energy in Nigeria will come down, and Nigeria will be another beautiful bride. And a place that people want to come and stay.
All right. Now, gentlemen, we have a minute each to summarize the point. I start off with you, Barrister. What do you think should be the way forward? And do you see Saudi Arabia being able to broker peace between Russia and Ukraine? After all, Putin said, look, I am not taking peace talk off the table. It's still very much there. We have to come and talk if Ukrainians are willing to come talk. Take it up from there.
War is never beautiful. And when it becomes doubt, it shows that dialogue is the way to go.
Yes.
I feel that at this time, the two countries need so much support from fellow countries or fellow presidents to actually do the needful. And what is the needful? To resolve their differences and to come to a round table and put a stop to so much stress that because the war, because the whole world is actually at stress right now. We don't want to talk about Africa and what is happening in Africa and the rest. But economically, it's affecting the whole world. Take it or leave it, like it or not. That's the reality. So I think that peace should be given a chance at this time.
Peace should be given a chance
Exactly.
at this time. All right. Honorable?
Yeah, well, I want to support the notion of giving peace being given a chance, but whenever you fight wars that are not called for, there's a lot of commitment, there's a lot of indebtedness. All the weapons that have been supplied to Ukraine is not for free. They have to pay for it.
They'll pay for it.
Unfortunately, that has put everybody in the top side of the quarter, like in a little tight corner. But I'm hoping and praying that to avoid this Ukraine and Russian problems from spreading to other regions in Africa, outside the issue of food insecurity and the proliferation of light weapons and all this other ammunition, like in Libya when there was war. By the time Gaddafi was gotten rid of, those weapons went into the markets, and banditry and kidnapping became a thing of a very serious problem, especially in Africa, that is still growing. I hope that they find a way, if Saudi Arabia can resolve their problems. And with all due respect to the Ukrainian president, he needs to really take a seat back, because I don't think he's strong enough to face Russia.
Well, you've heard both of them. The last line, I don't think is strong enough to face Russia, but is getting support from others. But don't forget that every weapon supplied, the Ukrainians are paying for it. Minus the grain deal, how do you think they will fare? Was that attack on Moscow an attack of desperation, or is an attack of a dying horse or a caged lion saying whatever necessary to set myself free, that's what I'm going to use? Do you see this war escalating into Russia territory? Don't forget that for every bomb that explodes in Moscow, they have 1,001 ways to retaliate. Let's just seek peace. Let's pray for peace, because the world definitely is being affected positively and of course negatively. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on today's show. I appreciate your wonderful analysis. All right.
And that opened the heavens gates.
Later for your dad to come in, right? Can you imagine that? Yeah, my dad left. His dad followed to the minister. Like, anyway, that we talk for another day. See you next week Tuesday, God willing. Bye for now.